Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to go through a list of some books that I think are absolutely fantastic, but I don't feel I talk about enough. This is somewhat prompted by a recent best of video. Periodically, I like to do best of to sort of capture, usually at the end of a quarter, the books that I felt were standouts of that quarter. So I'd like to do best new fantasy as well as best books in general that are separate from new fantasy to ensure that I highlight things that are coming out, follow up on anticipated releases in doing something like that, but then also that I have this balance and then I'm picking up backlist fantasy and then also dipping my toes in other genres here and there. That said, because those are somewhat recap style, I said in one of them that I feel bad because when I really love something, chances are I've already talked about it at least once, if not a number of times, by the time we get to that recap style of video. So I wanted to actually take the time to highlight books that I think are fantastic, that are absolutely amazing, but maybe don't necessarily fit within the types of videos that I typically make, maybe don't necessarily fall under the umbrellas of, for example, adult fantasy with adult characters. I recently did a video for that. They don't necessarily have genre bender elements to them. And while a lot of these are going to be fantasy, they still don't necessarily fit within those lists. There will be a couple of other things that branch outside of fantasy. So it's just going to be kind of a mix of books that I think are great, but that I don't talk about nearly enough. I do want to make really clear that this is not in any way meant to be a hidden gems recommendations video. I absolutely love being on the hunt for hidden gems. I like reading a mix of popular and underhyped works, and there's nothing better. It's just the best when you read something and you're like, why is nobody talking about this? It's so good. And you can just share it with everybody and shout from the rooftops. I love that. But that is not necessarily what's happening today. If you are interested in some underhyped recommendations, I'll have some videos linked. But today truly is just ones that I don't feel I talk about enough. And some of them are actually pretty popular. I gotta say, some of them are quite well known. Jumping into it, the first two I wanted to talk about today, I don't talk about all that often because most of the fantasy works that I highlight are ones that are adult fantasy. Occasionally I'll read young adult, and then even less often I'll pick up middle grade. I enjoy fantasy of all different age ranges, and I feel in the same way that reading outside of fantasy sometimes highlights the pros and the cons of the genre that I love, I actually feel like branching outside of adult and picking up middle grade and YA, once again, it can really establish what sets adult fantasy apart, but also where maybe some shortcomings are from time to time. I also think sometimes you can be really taken aback and impressed by what somebody is able to accomplish. I think outside of books, a great example is Avatar: The Last Airbender. There's great character development, great redemption arc, the themes are amazingly executed, but the idea is still present within books as well. And these two books are childhood favorites of mine. We have the Bartimaeus trilogy and the Song of the Lioness, or the Alana series, depending on how you like to think of it. I find both of these to still be extremely memorable. One of these days, I am going to reread both of these because I really miss them. I consistently am saying, oh, I need to pick these up. And every time I do happen to mention them, I always say, I need to give that a reread, and I do. I really need to reread these. But if you've never picked up either, even if you're somebody who doesn't typically read middle grade, I still highly recommend checking these out. I think Alana especially speaks to sort of a classic fantasy feel, something similar to Mercedes Lackey, for example. I actually think there's a lot of parallels between that, and even in some ways, like a less depressing Robin Hobb, so to speak. The setup for the story for Song of the Lioness is you actually explore this character's arc over the course of a quartet. And initially, she has a twin brother, and within their world, they have specific gender roles more often than not. So she is meant to go to a magic school. He is meant to go to a school where he's going to learn to become a warrior, learn how to fight, basically become a knight-like character. And neither of them are interested in these roles. They are interested in each other's roles. And given that they look so much alike, they decide to switch places. And you are exploring Alana's journey as she is going through this school setting and becoming a warrior as somebody who's in disguise the whole time, which is something, been there, done that. But of course, been there, done that now. I feel like we especially see this trope, or we have seen it many times. But when I read this as a kid, I absolutely loved it, not just for what it kind of had as a central theme of any child can do anything they set their mind to. Let's not try to put them in a box. beyond just that, I really enjoy the progression of the story because while she starts out as a child, she grows into an adult over the course of this quartet, which I had not really seen before. As a kid, I was accustomed to the main characters being kids and staying kids. And that idea of growing up alongside the character, I think, gets mentioned about other series, but I don't really see it talked about Song of the Lioness as often. And it's a part of a shared universe. And this was the part that was especially appealing to me as a kid because I'd never really had epic fantasy like that before, where you're picking up series within series. That's maybe perhaps where the Robin Hood Mercedes Lackey parallels are coming into the picture in my head as well. But my older sister, who's 5 years older than me, she was enjoying this series. And so it was just so fun to get to also connect with her because it doesn't stay in one place where you're only following this character and you really only connect to it at a certain time. Maybe, if you're 7 or 8, you read something and you love it. But by the time you're 10 or 11, you're like, oh, I'm over that. That's kid stuff. Because when you're a kid, you really do transition from phase to phase so quickly. And life is just moving so fast and you're maturing. And to have a story that felt like you got to grow up alongside the character, it not only meant that you got to be a fan of that series for a long time, but as was the experience of myself and my sister, we were both fans of it at different ages. And my sister, being so much older than me, I was never cool to her growing up. So it's just really great to have that connection. I have a lot of fondness for that story. And I really do think that it's something that a lot of people would still enjoy if they were to pick it up today. When it comes to the Bartimaeus trilogy, which I know there's more books now that have been written in this world that I need to check out at some point. However, just the original trilogy, I have said so many times, I distinctly still, over a decade later, remember, probably closer to 2 decades now, let's think about it, but many years later, I still distinctly remember the ending and realizing that I had never really experienced an ending like that before because the end of that story is great. The setup is that in the first book, you follow this young boy who is an apprentice to a magician type of character. They really do not like their mentor and they are learning magic and they try, despite the fact that they are not really qualified for this kind of a spell, they try to summon a djinn. And this djinn, all they want to do is break free of their bonds and escape. And if they escape, they actually could be very dangerous. And this particular djinn that is summoned happens to be Bartimaeus, who is witty and wily and very silly. This is also a character who has the ability to have multiple thoughts at the same time since they're not a human. And this is shown throughout the story by having footnotes whenever Bartimaeus has multiple thoughts. Then he'll break it apart. And he actually kind of breaks the fourth wall, if you will, and talks to you directly, which I recognize that's true of first person in general, but really talks to you directly, like tells you, I know you humans aren't capable of this, but I am, so I'm going to try to make this easier for you. That kind of thing, where he's very much acknowledging that you are reading about him. So that was fun. I hadn't seen that before, and I still feel like that's not the easiest thing to accomplish without feeling gimmicky, and that story definitely did it really well. It was just very entertaining and fun and different. I'd never experienced a story like that. I had never seen something use footnotes in that way before. And in that first story, you are seeing Bartimaeus, even though he is bound to Nathaniel, he doesn't want to do anything that Nathaniel tells him to do, and he's always trying to find the wording to get out of whatever his commands are. And so even though he has to do his bidding, he despises him and is going up against him at every turn. Then over the course of the trilogy, you're seeing Bartimaeus and Nathaniel kind of grow to have a respect for one another, a mutual respect. In the second book, Nathaniel gets older. So once again, you have a story where within the course of the series, the character is getting older. And you likely as a reader, if you are a young person, you are getting older alongside the character. So within the second book, he is now a young man and he's very haughty and full of himself. And Bartimaeus is like, ugh, I kind of liked the kid version of you, but you suck now. I hate this guy. And then in the last book, you are seeing that this is very much a man, and Bartimaeus and him perhaps are having a conclusion to their arc within that last book. And throughout the course of the trilogy, you're also exploring the last time that Bartimaeus grew to care about somebody, which was centuries ago. And so you're kind of exploring what happened with that, the parallels with the present. And it was really, really well executed. I really enjoyed that story in general. Both of those fantastic And if you especially, I think it'd be so fun if you have a young person in your life that you like to buddy read with, whether it be your own children or nieces and nephews or anything like that. I think these would be so fun to buddy read. Where those two were both middle grade fantasy, these next two are both going to be nonfiction books that I still think are two of the best nonfiction books I've ever picked up. I highly recommend them to everyone. One of them would be Evicted by Matthew Desmond. I actually very much want to read Poverty by America by the same author because I genuinely would read anything that he puts out. I think the amount of work and effort that goes into all the research that he does, the way he presents the information, it's just crafted amazingly, and the information is significantly important. Within this story, you are looking at, well, story is not the right way to put it, but within this book, you are looking at the ways that the eviction system, it really can be utilized to the benefit of landlords at times, how even when somebody is trying to get up on their own 2 feet and to start fresh and get out of these situations, it is a cycle that is near impossible to get out of once you are in it and you're exploring all the ways that that is the case. I also think that how it's written is very much like watching a documentary. Matthew Desmond very much has this approach of distancing himself from the information that he's delivering to you and just delivering the information. And he explores by actually living among a lot of the people that are facing eviction. And he recorded basically every conversation that was had and then just changed their names for their safety and privacy, but delivers everything basically as it happened. And very rarely did he ever actually intervene at all. And when he did, he made it very known. Like, for example, there's a moment where somebody just needs a couple bucks or a little bit of change or something like that. And I think initially he said, oh, and then they got some off of somebody and were able to get XYZ, whatever the thing was. And then later he reveals like, oh yeah, that was me. I felt like, how can I not just give this person a couple bucks? It's all they need for something that was really, really important in that moment. But it really does feel like you are watching a documentary just in book form. And what I think it especially did well is it not only delivered the information in a way that was easily digestible, and not only was the information important, but it really, really built empathy. At least in my opinion, it did. For just seeing how easy it is if you don't have a safety net, that it's just so quick that it could be so many of us if just a couple of things were tweaked about our own lives. It's absolutely fantastic. Heartbreaking, but amazing. The other nonfiction book, and it's one that when I read it, I definitely was saying, I think everybody needs to read this. I still say that to a lot of people in my own life. It's just because we are typically focused on fantasy books here on this channel. I don't get the chance to bring it up as often, but Cobalt Red is something that showcases the mining in the Congo, the way that the people are mistreated, to put it lightly. That really doesn't do justice at all to what they're actually experiencing, but it is incredibly eye-opening if you are unfamiliar with this topic. Within the Congo, it's a very mineral-rich area, and the people living there are not the ones that are benefiting off of the riches of the land. Instead, it's a lot of wealthier nations, including the one that I live in, the United States, who have come in and basically employed slave labor and children to mine these mines. It is not safe. People are frequently dying within these mines. People do not have access to education, electricity, decent housing, safety. There's so much about the situation that is absolutely terrible, and you are exploring all the red tape and the reasons why nothing is changing, and whenever there is an attempt to make things better, the ways in which those people that are trying to do something good, or maybe even a company is trying to do something in the quote-unquote right way, there are so many things that sort of thwart their plans, and it just feels like this never-ending uphill battle. But it's one of those things where it doesn't have to be, if we kind of all collectively inform ourselves and take what we can from that and do what we can with that information, and we continue to educate ourselves and other people. It really feels like, as heartbreaking as it is and as devastating as it is, it doesn't have to be that way. So if you've never looked into this topic, even if maybe nonfiction books aren't the best way for you to get this information, maybe you don't retain it as well, or you don't necessarily have the time. Reading is something that's more of a fun thing for you, but you do want to be educated on these sorts of things. There are a lot of documentaries that go over this. You can likely find a lot of articles as well. And there are various social media accounts that are somewhat dedicated to raising awareness about these sorts of things. So definitely look into it if you haven't, because it's an incredibly important topic that is relevant still to this day and very much a part of, in sadly a lot of ways, it's a part of our everyday lives. Returning back to fiction, this next one is the one that when I was saying before, a lot of the books on this list are not necessarily underhyped by any means. They're just things that I don't talk about as much as I would like. We have Red Rising. So Red Rising is actually a series that I genuinely really, really love. I think part of why it doesn't get talked as much, I don't talk about it as often, is because there is a continuation series, which I'm sure if you're watching my channel, you're well aware of this, but I started it and I didn't like the continuation. And not because I didn't like the themes or I didn't like the writing or I felt like Pierce Brown, it was a cash grab or anything like that. It's just that once the door is closed on a series, I'm very picky about what is done in continuations, and I just wasn't liking what was being done. So I DNF'd the continuation series. I've heard it continues to be amazing, but so many people continue to talk about it because it is continuing to be released. It ends up being #1 hyped sci-fi release, if not the most anticipated release the years that the new installments are coming out. So it is very much a booktube darling. It has branched out of being a booktube darling and has become relatively mainstream. You'll even see it in reality TV shows at times in the background and things like that. So it is definitely a successful story. The original trilogy, I had a really great time with. I did enjoy this first book. I recognize a lot of the criticisms that have been made about it, and I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of them, but the things that this trilogy does really well, I really, really like. And the first book is a little bit more, been there, done that. It's not necessarily breaking new ground, but I actually really enjoyed the way it was written. And I feel like sci-fi, this didn't necessarily feel like it was only for a sci-fi audience. I feel like it utilized aspects of things that we see in fantasy quite often. So I think it kind of pulled me in as somebody who typically reads fantasy, and I really enjoyed the first book. And then the second book is the one that usually hooks everybody. And the second book for me, I was like, I didn't like that one as much. And then the third book, I really loved. I felt like it was a great combination of all the action that you get within the first book, all the things that have been built up. I really think were delivered upon within that third book. A lot of heartbreaking moments, a lot of really exciting moments, a lot of twists and turns over the course of the entirety of the trilogy. But a lot of things really came to a head at the end. And I just feel like really stuck. I think Pierce Brown really stuck the ending with that third book. I'm sure most of you know the setup for Red Rising. If you don't, it's looking at the far future where human beings live across the various different planets, and we are seeing that society has been broken up into this hierarchy where reds are among some of the lowest and golds are at the top, and we're trying to break the class system down. Specifically, we are following the character Darrow as he is infiltrating the golds and trying to break the class system down from within. That's it for some books that I feel are phenomenal, but that I don't think I talk about quite enough here on this channel. If you have any recommendations based off of the books that I brought up, feel free to leave those in the comments down below. And if you're interested in checking any of these out, I will have them linked in the description bar. But thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.